Hello and welcome to the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory, Waldron, and special guest Brian Zilem of the Blue Hardwood Podcast. What's up, guys?
Gentlemen, thanks for having me. Happy Labor Day.
To you as well, Brian. Happy to have you on and talk some Dallas Mavericks.
Get right into the Mavericks. As always, just a quick reminder, you can check out all of our shows, our previews on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, and YouTube. But before we look forward to next season, we're going to look back at last year quickly. 24-58, rough season, ton of injuries. Obviously, Dirk was looking a little bit older, the whole Nerlens-Noel situation. But what were your thoughts on last year, Brian?
It played out pretty much a little bit the way I thought it was. I mean, obviously, I had maybe pipe dreams of the playoffs once, we got Noel in there, but obviously that didn't work out. The season obviously started off with the summer getting DSJ in the Maverick uniform, very exciting. Throughout the summer, the very odd situation of Nerlens-Noel not signing a crazy long contract with the Mavericks, which was their expectation the entire time. I guess a lot of posturing on both sides. Didn't working out as far as signing Noel long term. He signed just the basic mid level of $4 million, and then I just didn't end up working out the way it did, and then it just created more odd situations throughout the season with him playing 4 to 12 minutes at a time, going up in the stands and getting hot dogs. And then getting thumb surgery, which he essentially sat out for the good majority of the season, maybe just a random appearance here and there. But that was pretty much a wrap on the Noel experiment. And then I think one of the biggest things that hurt the Mavericks last year was not having Seth Curry available at all. It was just really strange. He was, listed as, he's going to maybe be out for a month or two, and then he just didn't play at all, which really sucked. I was looking forward to seeing what he could do. 2016, 2017, he started to progress a little bit more as a offensive player, and it seemed like he was channeling some inner point guard. Not to say he was getting on Steph level, but he was obviously improving quite a bit from his days when he was in Sacramento. And then within the team, obviously you had the DSJ, full year running point guard. So there was obviously some brain farts for sure. But I mean, when you're 19 years old running an NBA team, you're going to look silly at times, most definitely. And then the team as a whole, of course, struggled, which led to their record 24-58. They struggled on the defensive end. Couldn't get that clutch rebound towards the end of the game. That seemed like they could never really find consistent shooting either throughout the year. I mean, try to throw in Doug McDermott. They had expectations at first, but when you start out the gate 1-7, that's going to kick you in the ass, so to speak. And then, moving forward, a lot of different things. We've got the addition of Luka Doncic, DeAndre Jordan. Hopefully we've got some better things to come, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, last year was one of the first years where Mark Cuban pretty much admitted that they were going to tank, that they were going, for a high draft pick, obviously, after the struggles. Losing Seth Curry was definitely a major loss. Actually, last year in my fantasy basketball league, I drafted Seth Curry, not realizing what was going to be, of course. And then, I think Harrison Barnes was okay. I'm still on the fence with Harrison Barnes. I'm not sure about the contract, but he definitely did take strides last year. I wish Wesley Matthews was traded, but it's obviously tough when you want a first-round draft pick in exchange for him, and I'm not sure if anyone even threw that many offers towards the Mavericks for Wesley Matthews. And as you mentioned with Dennis Smith Jr., some really explosive plays. You liked what you saw at times, but like any 20-year-old rookie, there's a lot of growing pains. Ill-advised shots and everything else. But I think if you're the Mavs, you got to like what you have between Harrison Barnes and Dennis Smith Jr. That's a two young pieces you can start to build around. And obviously, which we'll talk about, they drafted Luka Doncic this offseason. Now you got three guys that you can start to, build this Mavericks team around. Nerlens Noel was surely a disappointment. prime example of when you get a contract offer, you take the money. Do not play around with the money. You could end up losing it and possibly never get it back, which may be the case for Noel if he doesn't get his career back on path in OKC now. And then, of course, it was fun to watch Dirk. In the moments I watched Dirk, even though every time he runs, it hurts me because it just looks uncomfortable. But, this is a guy who's been in the league for 20 plus years, and, the time is ticking, and how much longer he has is, coming quicker rather than later. So you have to enjoy it for what you can. But it was a lackluster year, but at least this team has some young pieces going forward. So there is a bright future.
Yeah, and I think the one point you really hit on, Kory, is the fact that they finally went in a tanking route, which made the most sense for this team lacking young talent. And it's just not as easy to attract free agents when you don't have other stars in your team. And obviously, Dirk at this point isn't really bringing anybody in. So getting that high draft pick, which you're able to package with a pick and trade for Doncic, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then obviously the whole Noel situation was interesting. Dennis Smith Jr., like Brian has mentioned, kind of looked like one of those young point guards that does struggle at times, but he shows the potentials in the flashes and has those nice stretches. So I think the Mavericks are really happy where they're at. What would you say was the highlight of last season?
Highlight, I would say, towards the end of the season, Nick, the Mavs played Portland, and I'm trying to remember what game it was. It was one of the last 10 games of the season. But they played Portland, and you guys, if you YouTube it right now, you'd be able to see it. DSJ had a breakaway, and he essentially threw a bounce pass to himself for a dunk. Like, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible that he was able to do that. I'm actually not even sure if that's legal, but they didn't call it there. But Kory, what about you? Highlight of the season?
The highlight of the season for me is I don't even know if the shot went in, but it's when Isaiah Thomas was traded to the Lakers. The Mavs and Lakers were playing, and I have the photo. I'm probably gonna make it my profile picture after this podcast because it's just hilarious. Dirk is 7 feet tall, standing up. Not even jumping off his feet to take a jump shot, and Isaiah Thomas is just standing there on the ground with his arms wide up, arms straight up, and his arms even fully extended don't even get into the face or the view of Dirk. And I really hope Dirk made that shot, but it's a photo to me that sticks out for last season.
Yeah, it looks like a young child trying to defend an adult playing basketball.
Yeah, it's keep away. He's playing keep away.
Yeah, it's like when you're going against your dad when you're real little and it's like, yeah, your defense isn't really doing anything. But highlight for me, I thought Dwight Powell had a really nice season. Obviously, the contract isn't great, but I think they solidified him as maybe like their third big moving forward. Harrison Barnes, too, contract's not great, but I think he showed enough. And then having new pieces around him, you'll be happy having him as a piece moving forward. But biggest disappointment of last season?
For me, just the entire Noel situation. It sucks. I think Kory already touched base on this before. When you're offered money, you got to take it. And unfortunately, it sucks that he missed out from making about $70 million more than he did last season. I just wish him the best moving forward with OKC. Hopefully, he'll learn from this, become not only a better person, but hopefully a better basketball player with a new coach and new situation. Maybe pairing him with Dennis Schroeder could help his game.
Yeah. For me, all right. So I think that, and now we already talked about this. Now I don't know if it's really my disappointment because Brian kind of schooled me last time. My disappointment is that they didn't move Wesley Matthews. When you're going tank mode, I would have liked to see them get that contract off the books. I know he's a good locker room guy. He's a good wing defender. But I don't know. His efficiency has gone down. He hasn't shot over 40% from the field since he tore his Achilles his final year in Portland. He still can hit the long ball. I love his 3-point celebration too, the bow and arrow. I think that's dope. But it's just, I don't know. I would have liked to see him get moved just for some kind of draft pick. But of course, what the Mavs wanted in return for Wesley Matthews was a bit too high, I think, for the market.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wanted to take on that type of money. And gave up a first-round pick. Obviously, the money he was around 18 last year, now 18 this year. So it wasn't even an expiring contract. I don't think you want to sign up for a guy, like Kory mentioned, getting older, hasn't been the same since the Achilles injury. I think the Mavs just were kind of looking for an asset when they might have been trying to give away an asset to get off that contract. But for me, disappointment, I think Nerlens Noel, anytime you have a player who's like 22, 23 years old, who looks like he can be a young piece on your team, a building block, possibly, we know all the defensive potential he has. And then just for that whole situation, I don't think it's all in the Mavs either. I think Noel just like there's been a lot of questions when he was in Philly. Was the work ethic there? Did he really want to be a professional basketball player? Like Kory mentioned earlier, we'll see in OKC. It's a winning situation. They're not going to play him. He's going to have Westbrook bothering him, Adams bothering him. Like this will be a make or break year, and he obviously lost all that money contract wise. And it's at this point, it looks unlikely for him to get it back, but you never know if he has a great season in OKC. But for me, that's biggest disappointment, a Noel, because that goes from being a building block to essentially being nothing that you lose. But looking at this year's rankings for the Mavericks, coming in number 21 in the OTG Power Rankings, created by our writers at OTG. What are your thoughts on this? 21, is that fair? Too high, too low for the Mavs?
For me, honestly, I think it's actually a little high. Looking at it overall, I feel like at least there's a couple teams that maybe I'm higher on than you guys as a whole. I mean, Bulls at 26, I feel like their roster is so much better than Dallas's right now. I feel like the Bulls are a playoff team. I feel like the Suns roster could be a little bit better than Dallas's as well. And hey, I wouldn't be surprised if the Nets actually are a little bit improved this year as well. Just because I know I see what Dallas has, and I guess I see all these other teams making improvements throughout the season. 21 for me, just on your the OG rankings overall, that seems just a little bit high. I feel like they're more kind of towards the bottom, maybe around 24, 25.
I think this is pretty fair, and this is mainly because I think Luka Doncic is going to be really special. So I think this team is going to be slightly better. I know that a couple of people over at OTG had the hot take that maybe the Mavericks even make the playoffs this upcoming year. I don't know if I'm ready to go that far. That seems a little bit of a stretch. But I like, DeAndre Jordan coming in. I like Luka Doncic and Dennis Smith Jr. in a pairing. And if Harrison Barnes can take his game up maybe another level, I think this team is surely going to be competitive. And I think 21's fair. I actually think that this team could even sneak into the top 20. But I don't see them going much farther down or up. I think they're right between this like 22 to like 18 range probably.
Yeah, I can see argument both ways. I mean, I could see, they add all this talent, depending on what you think of Luka, maybe you, bump him up a few spots. But I also, like Brian was saying, you look at the roster, not extremely talented in what they did last year, and there's still question marks on the team. You could boost them down a few spots. So I think around this range is pretty fair, but I would be okay if someone wanted to move them up 2 or down 2. And I could see it kind of both ways. But moving on to this year's additions, obviously the big talk, Luka Doncic, number 3 overall via the trade with the Hawks. A lot of people had him best player in the draft. A lot of pro experience overseas, good size, excellent feel for the game. The major question is pretty much athleticism and defense. What are your thoughts on drafting Luka number 3?
I was surprised. Honestly, I was kind of blown away that this actually happened because from reports, Luka was Dallas's number 1 guy the entire time. They say Luka was number 1 on the board over everybody, over Ayton and Bagley, which I was like, wow, okay. And then they actually went up and got their guy. To me personally, I may be just one person that feels like this way. I'm not a fan of giving up the top 5 protected pick this year just because, for the 2019 draft, only just because there's potential where the Mavericks could still not be very good. And I believe Kory's already mentioned it earlier where, it's not a terrible idea just to kind of have homegrown talent just because for whatever reason, free agents don't like coming to Dallas. So just on that aspect of the trade, I'm not – if it was a top 10 protected pick, I would love this trade. But the only thing that's nothing against Luka at all. I just from a team building perspective, like I don't like giving up assets when you don't have a lot and you haven't been very good for a long time. I mean, that just shows they're just that high on Luka. Maybe I'm just a little crazy, but it'll be really fun, really fun. Everybody's obviously in love with this kid. Some people had him number 1 overall over everybody. He was the MVP in EuroLeague. He's been playing like with grown men probably since he's about 15, I believe. So it'll be fun. I'm not really sure exactly what position he's going to play moving forward, but he's got some terrific playmaking ability. Not necessarily great defensively. Lateral movement's not great, but he'll at least put in the effort. And when you're in the NBA, you may not be a great defender, but at least as long as you're not putting out a mellow effort defensively, I think you're okay.
I've said this on the Hawks preview, and I've said it on several times to Nick. I think the Hawks made one of the worst trades in NBA history by not drafting Luka Doncic and letting him go. The Mavericks played their cards right perfectly. They got the best player in the draft, at least as of right now, in my opinion. He's got winning experience, as you mentioned, Brian. He's played against European stars. He's played on big stages. You made the great point though of his lateral quickness. That's my one real concern is just can this guy be quick enough and athletic enough to hang with the guys in the NBA. Granted, he is 19, 20, so he's very young. He still has to get around an NBA training staff, and they're going to put him through a ton of tests. They're going to get him in great shape. So that's my one concern is the lateral quickness and his ability to defend. But I love his scoring ability. I love the playmaking. It just feels like if you're from Europe and you're a point guard, you have crazy playmaking abilities. Like that's just like what they focus on over there. So I'm looking forward to that. I think him having DeAndre Jordan is going to be a nice pairing. I think this is a really good fit for Doncic, especially when the door is closing for Dirk Nowitzki, and now you have a new star face of the franchise to take his spot, and I think Luka Doncic is going to be that guy.
Yeah, I love Luka. Like Kory said, I had him as number one as player in the draft as well, especially, talking to Dylan Jackson, our draft expert. And it just feels like Luka has the potential to be, one of the best players in the NBA at a certain point, just being this great playmaker. Defense obviously will be a concern, but we've seen other great players get away with having bad defense and still being highly ranked. I think the Mavs are okay trading next year's pick because they're like, all right, we got our guy. And then going to next offseason, they have a ton of cap space. So they're probably in the mindset that, we have a couple players, if they have a really good season, Luka's looking great, Dennis Smith Jr., Harrison Barnes, like now we can bring in some more pieces. And even if it's not the all-star type pieces, you could still sign young players who are coming off the rookie contracts, send out offer sheets on restricted guys and whatnot. I think you make the move for Luka, especially if you believe he can be that, big time talent out of the draft and be the best player. And I think you make that move. And I'm excited to see what he can do. And position wise, like I think it benefits him now that the NBA is going more positionless, where it doesn't really matter where you play. They're just going to take advantage of your skill set. What do you think's best case scenario for Luka in his career and this season?
Ooh, career, man. I'll be honest, Nick, I haven't really thought that far ahead. I mean, career-wise, if he ends up being a better version of Hedo Turkoglu in his heyday, I mean, I'd be completely okay with that. There's obviously still a lot of filling out that we still have to do with this kid. He hasn't even played an official NBA game yet, so I'm not willing to say he's going to be the next LeBron as far as having the superstar power identity. I mean, if to me personally, Hedo Turkoglu in his heyday at Orlando when they were making the finals was a really good player. So if Luka could be above that, I think that's a win.
When I look at Luka, I'm looking more like Steve Nash. Maybe
Okay.
not as athletic and quick, but you can kind of see some similarities. Fantastic playmakers, can create their own shot, can get to the rim. And defensively, Nash was never really a good defender. But like Nick mentioned, you can kind of get away with bad defense if your offense is, really good and you can do, set up other guys. So for me, I'm seeing like a Steve Nash type ceiling. And I don't want to think about the floor because I'm too high on Doncic to think about that.
Yeah, I think all-star type player, and moving forward, I think he's going to be his own unique player with different skill sets from guys across the board. And like you said, playmaking, scoring. And I think the one thing I like too is seeing the clutch ability overseas and defensively, like Kory was saying, and I said earlier, you don't need to necessarily be a great defender. And like Brian was saying, just put in the effort, be a good team defender, take advantage of your size. I think he'll be okay. But moving on to the other draft pick, Jalen Bronson, 33rd overall. Thoughts on him?
Love him. I actually spoke with Eugene Rapape, who's actually SB Nation writer for the Villanova Wildcats. I'm in love with this kid, man. The comps he was getting in the draft, he plays like an old man. that he was getting that a lot, and I was really shocked that he fell that far. Obviously we're in a league where, in the draft, if you're a junior or senior, you're probably not going to get picked very high as far as these freshmen and sophomore, just because some people just think, you've hit your ceiling. These guys haven't. I think this guy could be a building block moving forward as far as someone that's going to get some heavy point guard minutes. And just as far as a comp, I kind of see a lot of Darren Williams, just because he uses his body and he'll post up somebody on the inside like he did in Villanova quite a bit. So I'm really in love with this guy.
Well, you just better hope he doesn't have Darren Williams' attitude.
Ooh, touche.
I like Jalen Brunson as well. A little 6'2", 198. What I like about him is the fact that he's polished. He played on the highest level in college. He won a national title. 2, right? He won 2 national titles.
I believe so. Yep.
Yeah. So he won 2 in the 3 years. I love guys who win before they enter the league. I just think that's important. And so now you're pairing Brunson, Doncic, 2 guys who have won in their own leagues and everything else. I think that kind of leadership is huge. And now you just got to see how his game translates to the NBA. I don't think Jalen Brunson's ever going to be a starter, but he may be a very capable 6-man, possibly off the bench.
What about the other second-round picks, Raymond Spalding, and then obviously Antetokounmpo's brother, Kostas Antetokounmpo? Thoughts on those guys?
Well, to touch base on Kostas, it's funny that Dallas finally got an Antetokounmpo in their draft after missing out on the opportunity of drafting Giannis so many years ago. Obviously, playing that first year in Davidson, he actually was going through a lot of different stuff. He actually was dealing with the passing of his father when he got recruited by Davidson. He actually had a new coach coming in that didn't originally recruit him, so he was going through that process. Obviously, jump shot still needs a lot of work. From those games he did get in Davidson and play, he's very athletic, very long. He'll definitely be a G League player, and anything. If he's in a uniform contributing, that's just a bonus. When you're Mr. Relevant at number 60, nobody's expecting anything from you. Ray Spalding, I'm really fascinated by this kid. I actually spoke to Jeff Greer, who covers Louisville basketball on the regular. This is a kid who's long, had an opportunity to actually, improve and start last season. He put on probably about 5 or 10 pounds of muscle during the summer league, so I'm really intrigued what he'll do. And potentially, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's like Dwight Powell 2.0, especially when Powell's contract is up next year, because I believe Powell has this year and next year, where he's just like a cheaper bargain.
Yeah, I don't have much thoughts on Spalding. I'm happy that you're high on him, Brian. That's the positive. I loved the Antetokounmpo pick only because obviously the other brother Thonis. Is that the other one that the Knicks drafted?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. He's never really turned into anything. He's still, I think, in the G League, or he might even be playing overseas now. But this is another Antetokounmpo. I think you just take the flyer. If you guys remember, Giannis wasn't really that crazy his first year. Obviously, he's gotten better and better. But all of these brothers are just freakishly long. Kostas is 6'10" with a 7'2" wingspan. What the hell is that? That's ridiculous. Obviously, he's small, 195 pounds. He only weighs 20 pounds more than me and has that much size. I think but for the Mavs, why not? Take the risk on the Greek Freaks family. It's a low risk, high reward. Maybe this kid can put on some muscle, can develop a jump shot. He already can block shots and do some of those things because of the wingspan and everything else. But it's all about putting on mass. And we've seen how big Giannis has gotten. Giannis was a twig when he came to the league, and now this dude is pushing boulders in the offseason. So for me, I like the Kostas pick. I was really happy to see that one to end the draft.
Worst case scenario, it helps you sell G League tickets.
Exactly.
For sure.
Free agent signing wise, obviously the big move, DeAndre Jordan, 1 year, 22.8 mil, short-term deal, only 1 year, kind of hit or miss if they want to keep him or not. Obviously he fills a need, and it's super ironic that he actually ended up in Dallas after that whole incident a few years ago with the Clippers. But what are your thoughts on DeAndre finally being in Dallas?
I mean, I think to me, I think it's certainly a stopgap for sure. If he ends up being a long term with Dallas, I'd be kind of surprised just because with going through the season, filling out what lineups work best with like DSJ, Luca, Barnes. Um, I if he's a long term piece moving forward, I'd be surprised. I mean, I was actually having kind of an internal conversation with myself. I think currently, I still have to go back and do some research, but he might be the best center to ever suit up in a Mavericks uniform. And I'm a Tyson Chandler guy, man, but I think statistically overall, he might be the best center to ever suit up for the Dallas Mavericks, which is insane. Now, I think it could be really fun to see the lobs Luca and DSJ could throw to him. Is he's actually improved his foul shooting a little bit, so he's not completely unreliable at the foul shooting. Once teams start kind of doing a hack of Jordan, so to speak. So, um, and then you're getting a guy who's guys I believe I don't know off the top of my head. I think he averaged anywhere from about 14, 15 rebounds last year, something just outrageous like that. So those late minute rebounds where Dallas wasn't getting, they have an opportunity to get that. But honestly, moving forward, if he was a long term piece, I would be shocked.
It's funny how this goes full circle, right? You have the DeAndre getting kidnapped and after verbally agreeing to the Mavericks and leaving and then coming back. I mean, personally, if I was the Mavericks, I wouldn't have wanted DeAndre Jordan back. That's just me. I would have been petty probably. But I mean, it's a good move. They've been desperately looking for a center. Nerlens Noel is what I kind of envisioned. DeAndre Jordan is what I kind of envisioned Nerlens Noel could become, and obviously that didn't happen. So now, best case scenario, you get DeAndre Jordan, who can throw down could throw down lob, I should say, rebound, block shots. So I think DeAndre Jordan is perfect for what the Mavericks need. And obviously, it's a 1 year deal, right? So it's not like they're locked into anything.
Yeah, it definitely fills a need, but like you mentioned, Kory, I think I would have been second guessing myself going after him after he already kind of screwed me over in the past, and that put the Mavs in a really weird situation back then, and they ended up giving Wesley Matthews extra money because they didn't sign Jordan. So, I mean, it works out, gives them vertical spacing, helps Luka Doncic have a nice pick and roll partner. Same thing for Dennis Smith Jr., but we'll see what happens long term. Other free agent signings, Devin Harris feels like he's back with the Mavericks for like the 6,000th time.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on Devin Harris back in Dallas?
He obviously loves the community. He loves the area. I believe that's where his kiddo's going to school as well. I don't mind him, but the thing that could bother me, I think he could block some of Brunson's minutes that he could potentially get, and then also re-signing him, that kind of put the writing on the wall for Yogi Ferrell as well, where he saw like a lot of different log jams potentially where there's all these guards in between Luka, DSJ, and that I know we'll talk about that here in a minute, but like having the opportunity of not having him like is unfortunate. If you're asking me who would I rather have, Yogi or Devin Harris, I would much rather have Yogi just because long term, Devin Harris is very, not very good dude. I mean, good veteran leadership, but just as far as a team rebuilding moving forward, I would have liked to have him sign somewhere else. I mean, worst case scenario, maybe they could try to, ship him to somewhere again during the trade deadline and get a second round pick. I'm okay with that.
I just think he's on the back nine of his career. I think he's a very serviceable point guard. I know, Nick, you got the pleasure of meeting him. He's a good third string point guard now. I think he's a good vet to have on the bench, but I'm not really expecting anything from Devin Harris this year.
Yeah, it's not a bad move. He's a guy that can fill in when you need him, a veteran presence. Carlisle knows what he gets with him, and it seems like the Mavs always like having a lot of point guards. Obviously, Dirk re-signed.
I mean, it's kind of what you expected. Dirk giving you a dirt cheap deal, and then having Salam Missouri re-signed. I mean, he's just an energy guy. I mean, he's not really anything special. I would say he's probably one of the top 5 hated players in the league, just because a lot of people think he's dirty.
Yeah, he's always getting into it with somebody.
Yeah, exactly, and he kind of has a punchable face too.
Any thoughts on those two, Kory?
No, not for me. To me, I don't see much playing time.
Looking at the departures, Jonathan Motley, Nerlens Noel, Seth Curry, Doug McDermott, Yogi Ferrell, Kyle Collinsworth, Aaron Harrison. Are they going to lose anything not re-signing these guys? Any of them you wish they kept?
I mean, the Seth Curry one hurts. That really hurts to me, because right now, that he was somebody you could have gotten for cheap. I tried to kind of have a better understanding of why they didn't sign him to that, because it was only for 2 years, $2.5 million, or $2.75 million. The Blazers signed Curry for, but at that moment they just didn't have any money to sign him, which sucks, because DeAndre ended up actually eating up a lot of the Mavericks' cap at the time. So from my understanding, that's why they didn't have the opportunity to re-sign him, which is unfortunate, because they lost their biggest scoring punches, so to speak, with Curry and Doug McDermott. Believe it or not, I was really shocked he ended up actually getting that deal from Indiana. I thought if the Mavericks could kind of maybe a low ball and maybe get him for 2 years, $8 or $10 million, that would have been ideal. And then I mentioned it a little bit ago. I think losing Yogi, it's unfortunate, but I'm happy for him, kind of understanding like his situation. He initially like agreed verbally, but then I think him and his agent really thought about it and said, you know what, if I stay here, I'm not going to get a lot of playing time. So why not go to Sacramento, where I could be a consistent 6-7 guy off the bench, and that way my next contract I can get that $18-20 million.
I mean, you're going to miss the 3-point shooting, I think, of Seth Curry for sure. I think you're going to – I mean, you're not going to really miss Doug McDermott. I think he had a nice little stretch. I'm upset that my Pacers gave him that much money. I mean, Yogi was fun. I like Yogi. I think, was it 2017, he had like a 32-point game. He had like 9 threes, I think. So, like, he had some nice moments, especially after his time. I think he was with Brooklyn first.
Yep.
For a stretch. So I like Yogi. Played in Indiana. I'm a big Indiana guy all around, through and through. So I think you kind of miss Yogi, but that's another guy too. The Mavericks had a verbal agreement, and then he backed out last minute. Not last minute, but he backed out to go to the Kings. So I think you maybe miss Yogi, but now that you have Dennis Smith Jr. and Luka Doncic, I don't think you miss him that much. And then probably just the shooting of Seth Curry.
Yeah, I think, where the Mavericks are at, some of the guys they might have liked to keep, but given their situation, I don't think anybody's going to really come back and hurt them. Obviously, Seth has potential, but staying healthy is a concern, and everybody else, it was just like they found a better place elsewhere. Now, moving on to the prediction portion of the show, starters, who's opening night, starting 5?
Man, this has been really tough. I haven't really had a concrete lineup in my head yet. I mean, Carlo obviously hasn't said anything. He's not going to. I mean, whatever the starting lineup is opening night, I don't think that's going to be the same. It's obviously going to be a lot of hodgepodge lineups sometimes, but I think your lineup, which is going to get the most consistent work, to me, you have Dennis, Wes Matthews, Barnes playing the 3, Luka playing the 4, and DeAndre Jordan at 5.
You have Luka playing the 4? Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So the 4, and a member of the Mavs Nation staff team that I work with, he had presented this to me, and I'm really falling in love with it. Okay. So the biggest weakness is Luka's lateral movement. So which of the positions he could potentially guard has the most, I guess you could say, the slower position he could guard? That'd be the 4. And then they have DeAndre Jordan at the center right now. So in a parallel universe, potentially, this could be kind of like a Tyson Chandler covering up Dirk's defensive deficiencies on the 4.
Okay. All right. That's fair. So for me, I'm going Dennis Smith Jr. at the 1, Luka Doncic at the 2, Wesley Matthews at the 3, Harrison Barnes at the 4, and then DeAndre Jordan at the 5.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing as Kory. I think Luka and Wesley Matthews you could probably swap. I think I'm looking to probably hide Luka on depending on whatever defenders, offensive player out there that is struggling. A guy you can kind of hide that's not going to really do much with the ball in his hands. I think Barnes could definitely play the 4 against some of the guys, and he has in the past, and it seems like that's a position he's kind of working at. And I think Luka, depending on the matchup, is just going to hide on the weakest offensive player. Any position battles, any battles on the starting lineup or rotation wise you're going to see?
To me, I think it's point guard. Mavericks love signing 5 to 6 point guards on their roster. They've got DSJ. Luka's going to get some point guard minutes at times. They've got JJ Barea, Devin Harris, and then also Jalen Brunson. So I would say, as far as a position battle on a season-based, throughout the season, I would say it'd be at point guard definitely.
I don't really see that many position battles. I don't think there's a lot of talent on the bench that can challenge some of these starters. I mean, maybe there's a point guard battle between Doncic and Dennis Smith Jr., but I just feel like those guys have to be on the court together. I don't think it makes sense for them to be, one on the floor and one coming off the bench. Or maybe to start the year they do that, just to get Doncic some time to ease into the fact that I don't think he's played, this kind of long season, and the NBA is a different kind of grind. We see that European players generally do have somewhat of a slow transition. I mean, Porzingis, he started off really hot his first year, and then he kind of just looked fatigued the second half. So maybe you try and ease him in. But I really don't see a lot of places for there to be a positional battle.
Who would be the breakout starter for you guys?
For me, Nick, I'm leaning towards Harrison Barnes, only just because, depending on what they do with the starting lineups, there was a lot of different. Carlo at first last year, Barnes was playing a lot of the 4, and then halfway through the season, he was very adamant that Harrison Barnes is our 3. And then if you look at his, stats overall, throughout when he started playing 3, which he is, started playing a lot better, consistently moving forward. So, and then with Luka's playmaking ability, maybe Barnes could have that opportunity to have that corner 3 jump shot like he used to have back in the day with Golden State. Because I think as far as him as a player, the main difference between him and Dallas and Golden State, he hasn't really had that playmaker to find him the ball in the corner and get those wide open jump shots. Here, he's kind of had to fine tune his game, as far as being an isolation player, so to speak, and being able to get those buckets kind of in the mid range game. So Barnes to me could be the breakout player.
For me, it's between Barnes and Luka Doncic. I think Luka Doncic is going to be the guy. I don't know if he's my rookie of the year, which is tough to say, but I'm leaning towards Mo Bamba after the weird turn of events. But I think Luka Doncic is going to be top 3 in rookie of the year. So I think Doncic is going to be incredible. I think it wouldn't be out of the question for him to average 13 and 7 or 13 and 8. Nothing crazy, but you see the playmaking ability. I think Harrison Barnes, though, has probably the biggest potential to bust out. Everything I've read, prepping for this podcast today, he's been working incredibly hard this offseason. He's putting in a ton more work than he has in the past. And you love to see that. Obviously, it feels like everybody gets a headline like that almost. Victor Oladipo for the Pacers has been considered like a mini LeBron this offseason. So everybody gets those kind of headlines when they're working out hard. You just got to see if it translates. And I wouldn't be surprised if Harrison Barnes does take a giant leap and averages, maybe 25 plus points per game.
Yeah, I think Barnes is a great choice because obviously he's going to have better players around him and a playmaker in Luka, and then DeAndre being there too to help out defensively. But I'm going to go with Luka myself. I just think the tools are there, the opportunities there. Dallas obviously believes in him because they traded the pick to get him. So he just seems like the guy that's going to have a big season and be a rookie of the year candidate. Breakout bench player.
Jalen Brunson.
That's
a tough one, honestly.
Yeah, I'm gonna say is Dwight. I don't know if I'm gonna say Dwight Powell. I think he, like you mentioned, Nick, earlier, he showed. I mean, he was pretty good last year. A solid FanDuel. But I think
that's what matters.
I think you got to see what he can do. I mean, he's probably gonna be asked to play more minutes with Dirk getting older. He can play like a small ball 5 and everything. So I'm gonna say Dwight Powell.
Yeah, I'll go with Dwight Powell to kind of prove what he did last year was, what he can be and be more consistent and maybe improve a little bit more on the little things. And I think word is that he's put on a solid weight this season, working on his body, getting a little bit stronger. Looking at the wins, what's best case scenario for the Mavericks?
Best case to me, Nick, looking at the Vegas projections right now, Vegas has them winning. They're around 10 more games than they did last year. I think if they were around that 10 to 12 plus wins, I think that would be the best case scenario for them if they were around 34, 36 wins.
I think best case scenario, right around where Brian said. I think 34 wins, 33 wins. I don't think they're a playoff team. Sorry, Dylan. I think this team is just going to be like a 10 seed probably in the West when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think like 36, 37 wins. They'll definitely be better than last year and then having more talent and whatnot. But the West is so tough, it's going to be hard to get to 500. Worst case scenario.
For me, it would be if they were actually around 30 wins on the nose. I say that just because if they were only around maybe 30 if they were around 30, 31 wins, that would just decrease their chances lottery wise. And then for me, Kory's brought this up during the show as well. If you're going to tank, I would rather just be full tank, not kind of like halfway. And then them winning 30, only 30 games, that pushes them higher up as far as not having the percentage of getting a top 5 pick in the draft. So that's my reasoning for that. So that's just me. What do you think, Kory?
I think worst case for me would be under 30 wins. I don't even care what it is. I think if it's under 30 wins, that's the worst case scenario. And then of course, along with the record being worst case scenario, it would be maybe Dennis Smith Jr. doesn't get more efficient. Maybe the bad shots are still being put up. Maybe Luka Doncic doesn't look as good as we all anticipate. For me, it would be those two guys in particular not taking strides or looking good, and then this team just not winning games. So I think it'd be a combination of those two for me for worst case scenario.
Yeah, I think all the things that you just said, Kory, as well. Worst case for me would probably be 28 wins, and they just really struggle. Just injuries happen again. The talent just isn't quite ready yet. The young pieces don't gel properly, and they have to kind of make a decision about Dennis Smith Jr. and Luka, and they don't really gel, together. But actual prediction for the season.
I will honestly say 28 and 54. To me, you guys have touched base on how difficult the Western Conference is. And then the way, something that came up a lot last season, the teams that, were kind of on Dallas's level last year, the Phoenixes of the world, the Chicago Bulls, the Memphis Grizzlies, they would often struggle versus them. And if they're not going to sneak in the occasional few wins versus these top dogs, which is going to be very difficult, I just don't know where their wins come from. I mean, maybe they could maybe they improve slightly versus East this year, but to me, I just don't know because the West, it's going to be very difficult to get West, consistent wins versus the Western Conference because I think the West has improved tremendously, even with the departure of Kawhi. I mean, you've added, several different all-stars to the league. I mean, you've got LeBron now, you've got an upcoming team in Phoenix. Minnesota's still up there. You've got Utah rising with Donovan Mitchell. It's going to be very difficult to collect wins on the regular versus a very, very competitive Western Conference.
Yeah, 100%. My actual prediction is 31 wins. I think they just get over 30. But like you mentioned, I mean, there's 10 playoff teams in the West, and 2 of them aren't going to make the playoffs. That's
Exactly.
just how it goes. The Warriors, you got to play them 4 times a year. You got to play, as you mentioned, LeBron 4 times a year now. The Thunder, the Rockets, the Jazz, the Pelicans, the Nuggets, the Wolves, the Blazers. Like, the West is just a powerhouse. And if you don't have a complete roster and you don't have a solid bench, those are the kind of teams that you're going to have a tough time beating. I think this team will be competitive, but I think the depth is going to be an issue for them to actually close out and win games, just because, You just can't. I mean, what are you going to do? Play Barnes, 40 minutes a night? You really can't do that. And there's not the bench to me is going to be their one issue when they're trying to actually win games this year.
Yeah. Yeah. And Nick, if you don't mind, I wanted just to interject something Kory just touched on real quick. Just another reason why the Mavs may struggle out of the gate. I'm going to ask you both this right now. With the current roster the Mavs have right now, who's their best 3-point shooter going into this season right now?
Wesley Matthews, probably.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, the spacing is definitely something to look at. I guess you would say Dirk is their best 3-point shooter. Obviously.
By percentages, probably.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
he's going to make the most. And I mean, Wesley Matthews, considering who's going to play more minutes, is probably him. But if you look at it, I think it's not a very talented team from deep, which is obviously a problem in the NBA. I'm big on spacing. So
you're absolutely right, Nick. It's actually Dirk at 1 and Wes at number 2. So you're somebody that's 40 is your best 3-point shooter percentage-wise right now.
And he's probably playing under 15 minutes a game, especially at this point. You know what I mean? And he's not playing back-to-backs. So that's a big concern. But my prediction, I'm going to go with, I think, 31 wins. I think they start the season rough. Maybe they find some nice grooves in the middle of the year and maybe at the end of the year where it doesn't make as much sense to tank for them because I don't think they're going to go full-out tank and they're going to be kind of caught in that in-between land. But the truth, what emoji represents the Mavericks for you?
I would say the emoji smiley face that has the double stars because a lot of people are going to see double stars with Luka and DSJ.
My emoji is going to be the emoji with a cowboy hat. We're in Dallas. We're down there. He's smiling because I think he can be happy. You're happy to be a Dallas fan right now. You got Luka Doncic, you got Dennis Smith Jr. You still got Harrison Barnes, who looks like he's going to be getting better and better. You still get to watch Dirk on a nightly basis unless tragedy strikes. So I think it's a happy cowboy right now. It's not. There's nothing really to be upset about right now.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the green check because I think they nailed their pick in Luka and they have their piece moving forward. Every team needs that one star player, and I think that's their guy. Obviously, we could be completely wrong, but I just have the good vibe about him. But league pass rating, where do the Mavericks sit 1 through 10?
I will grade it 7.5, only just because this could be Dirk's last season. So those who are maybe the occasional fan and know of Dirk, they try to soak as much Dirk in as they possibly can, and then seeing the progression of Luka and DSJ through.
My league pass rating is I'm gonna tie my high 4.5. I'm interested to see Luka Doncic and Dennis Smith Jr. I think those two are going to be fun to watch, and then I'm intrigued to see. You got to watch some Dirk. I've said this before when we talked about the Cavs. Watching LeBron James last year was special, and these players who are on the back nine of their career, so to speak. You want to enjoy it for as long as you can. Obviously, Dirk isn't in his prime anymore, and he's not lighting it up on a nightly basis like he was. But you have to understand that these guys are now, and they're iconic. They're a part of NBA history. They're Hall of Famers. So you want to watch them for as long as you can, as much as you can.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 5, so right around Kory's mark. I think there's some intrigue with Dennis Smith Jr. still in his second year, and then Luka being a rookie, how DeAndre fits, what type of steps Harrison Barnes can make, and obviously the great Dirk, watching him put up a couple threes and have a big game here and there. But what TV show would you watch over the Mavericks? Obviously, you're a Mavs guy, Brian, so it's a tough decision. Hypothetical gun to your head. You had to pick a TV show. What are you picking?
Man, see, this is tough because, I'm not, a huge TV guy. I mean, I'm more Netflix. Although I will say I'm a big DC guy, so maybe if, the season premiere of, The Flash or The Arrow comes on, I'm down.
I'm going to say Peaky Blinders. I'd never gotten into the show fully. It's on Netflix.
I don't even know what it is.
Basically, it's all right. It's a mobster show, but it's back in the old days. It's over in Europe. I think it's a British port or whatever. If you saw the main character, you would know who it is. It's the guy who plays Scarecrow in Batman Begins.
Yep.
Yeah, so he's the main guy. It's not bad. But granted, I have tried 4 times to watch the first episode and I can't get through it. So,
sounds pretty bad.
everyone tells me like once you get into it, it's really good. But it's kind of tough to get into it. But I would probably try and give that a try.
So I guess I'm gonna go with a controversial pick, and some people might be offended. I'm gonna go with Bob's
God.
Burgers because I know people are
Oh
really.
my God.
I mean, I just like it's. I like adult like cartoons and stuff, but that's just like not my favorite. Like I'll watch it here and there, but it's not like, oh my God, I need to keep watching every episode of Bob's Burgers. And so I'll give the Mavs, some love, I guess.
Oh, you're killing me.
Bob's Burgers is actually pretty freaking hilarious. Like, I think it's just like hidden under the Fox hodgepodge of like animated shows. But I will admit, I've binged some Bob's Burgers on Hulu. Pretty freaking funny, man. Like, just because I love the guy who does the voice of Bob, because he's also the guy who does Archer.
Yes, he's fantastic. John Benjamin, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, because also I don't know if you guys actually watched this growing up, but I loved him. Did you guys actually watch home movies at all growing up?
Oh yes, I've seen a couple. I wasn't like a huge fan, but I've caught enough to know.
Yeah,
very underrated. I believe that's still on Hulu. If you guys ever get bored one day, watch it because John Benjamin is hilarious as Coach McGurk, the soccer coach.
Okay.
But that wraps it up. Thanks, Brian, for hopping on for the first time. Kory, always a pleasure. You can check us out on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, and YouTube. And big thanks to everybody for listening.
Peace out. Now, glad.